Hello everyone, this is class number 4 of American Literature. Today we are going to talk about Romantic literature. Last class we have covered the revolutionary times. Remember that we've talked about how revolution gave the Americans this self-conception that led them to have or to start having their own literary identity and how they started to write, and the examples of this is Washington Irving, who gave America its own literary identity in this period, and this is why he is called the father of American literature. You will note that another person was called the father of American literature, who is Mark Twain, but Mark Twain was another turning point, another watershed in American literature. We will come to him and we will give him a good portion of time for discussion. Today we are going to discuss Romanticism in America. Romanticism in America is a movement that hailed from Europe in 1820, specifically from Germany. Okay, Germany was the birthplace of Romanticism, and immediately it traveled throughout Europe, and from Europe it came to America. Now we will look at the Romantic period, and within the Romantic period we have transcendentalists writers such as Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. The Romantic period starts in 1820 and 1860. Okay? This is a good period to discuss because after this we are going to delve into the American Civil War, which has its own literature as well. The focus today will be on Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman, and Dickinson, and on Whitman's Song of Myself. We are going to touch upon these things on the way to our main text in this course, which is Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn. Okay? But first, let us give a context. The Romantic movement, which originated in Germany but quickly spread to England, France, and beyond, reached America around the year of 1820, some 20 years after William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, these people who wrote the manifesto of Romanticism in the English-speaking world. Okay? You must have studied them in literary criticism. Okay? After they had revolutionized English poetry by publishing lyrical ballads. In America, as in Europe, fresh new vision electrified artistic and intellectual circles. Writing came, or written literature, lyrical ballads was exported to America, and this revolutionized, electrified the intellectual and literary circles of the time. It is important to notice that at the time, the line between different disciplines or different fields of knowledge is not as clear as in reality, because a writer might be a poet and a philosopher at the same time, or might be a philosopher writing in literary style. Okay? So when we talk about intellectual, we talk about literary as well. Okay? Because these concerns were, the time concerns were influencing everybody, including these people who concern themselves with literature, who express, in fact, what is happening on the ground in literary writing. Okay? Yet, there was an important difference. What is that? Romanticism in America coincided with the period of national expansion and the discovery of a distinctive American voice. Remember, they were expanding on the ground and looking for a literary identity at the same time, trying to be independent from their forefathers in America, literary forefathers in England. Okay? The solidification, making robust or building, okay, consolidation, the solidification of a national identity and the surging idealism and passion of Romanticism nurtured the masterpieces of the American Renaissance. Romanticism is usually connected with inner self, with self-perception, self-conception, and these are important for a nation building. The nation building, in fact, started as a romantic idea. Then, after that, people come to face to realities. Okay? And you will see that the Americans started Puritans. Then they found that Puritanism failed. Yes, it helped them at a certain stage, but it failed. So they resorted to enlightening ideas. They aspired for justice, for rationality, for scientific inquiry, for democracy. And this all was reflected in writing. Once they got their independence, once they are religious free people, they start to romanticize life. Okay, we have imagination, we have ambition, we have inspiration. This inspiration is much reflected in romantic writing. After that, we come to realism that was led by, or that is much manifested in Mark Twain's work, especially his Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. We'll come to this when we reach the phase of realism. But this is a quick comparison of how literary schools in America are categorized in terms of time and space. Okay? Romantic ideas centered around art as inspiration, the spiritual and aesthetic dimension of nature, and metaphors of organic growth. This is a response to enlightenment, rationality. Okay, they believe that why on earth are we stuck with rationality? Why don't we roam in the skies? Why don't we think inside instead of think outside? Why don't we reflect on our own inner souls? Okay? Art rather than science, Romantics argued, could best express universal truth. They seek truth, and science to them gives or paves the way to the truth, but truth is only by art, because art is the self function. Okay, it is much in coherence, much in keeping with man's inner soul. Okay. In his essay, The Poet, Ralph Waldo Emerson, perhaps the most influential writer of the Romantic era, asserts. So, Ralph Waldo Emerson was, to some, the most influential writer of the Romantic era, although he is considered a transcendentalist as well. So, you can say, unlike Romanticism in Europe, we have this offshoot of Romanticism in America that is called transcendentalism. Okay, and later on, you will be able to differentiate or to pinpoint that nuance between Romanticism and transcendentalism. Okay, he asserts that for all men live by truth and stand in need of expression, in love, in art, in avarice, in politics, in labor, in games, we study to utter our painful secret. The man is only half himself, the other half is his expression. Expression is a very important thing, to express your inner soul, to express your inner ideas, okay? The idea of self, which suggested selfishness to earlier generations and Puritan thought, people were taught to be to the public, to live for the public interest. Now, self is the center of Romantic school, okay? So, self meant selfishness, but to the Romantics, it was again something else. It was redefined. New compound words with positive meanings emerged. Self-realization. To look for your own self, to realize your own, to achieve things that make yourself manifested. Okay? Self-expression, to express yourself. Self-reliance, to depend on yourself. Okay? These are newly emerged word and romantic school of literature in order to assert the status, the position of the self in the way for truth looking, truth exploration. Okay? The romantic spirit scene particularly suited to American democracy. Individualism is a very important key word here. When people start to look for self-realization, self-reliance, self-expression, then you are talking about individualist values, ideals. So the romantic spirit seemed particularly suited to American democracy. It stressed individualism, affirmed the value of the common person, and looked to the inspired imagination for its aesthetic and ethical values. Individualism, the person is the center, not the society. Okay? It affirmed the value of the common person being important. He's no longer on the margins of life, on the margins of the society. Okay? And look to the inspired imagination for its aesthetic. For the first time, art is the center of production. For its aesthetic, not only for values, and for ethical values. Okay? Henry David Thoreau is a very important romantic writer. With Ralph Waldo Emerson, they formed Transcendentalism. He is of French and Scottish descent and was born in Concord and made it his permanent home. Concord in Pennsylvania, Northeast. Remember, most of these writers so far are from the Northeast. Most of the intellectual writers come from the Northeast, which is in New England, up the north. New York, Walt Whitman, for example, is from New York. Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau are from Pennsylvania, next to New York or close to New York. What else? I want also to note that most of intellectual and cultural world-class institutions are still based on the Northeast. Harvard, Yale, University of Harvard, Yale University, New York University, Rutgers University are all based on the Northeast, in addition to Princeton, which is very famous as well. Like Emerson and Whitman, he was influenced by Hindu and Buddhist philosophy. In world literature, there is an assignment I usually give to my students to look into the traces of Oriental cultures on Emerson, Whitman, and Thoreau. When you talk about Hindu, this is Orient, this is East, okay? And we also ask students to compare this triangle of Emerson, Hindu, and Gibran Khalil Gibran connection. Gibran Khalil Gibran lived in the same place where Emerson and Thoreau lived, okay? In Walden is a place, okay? Like a hedge, like a wood or a plot. Thoreau not only tests the theories of transcendentalism, he reenacts the collective American experience of the 19th century, living on the frontier. There is this concept in American literature that is called frontier literature. We'll come to it when we talk about Mark Twain and his work. Frontier literature means that this literature is written along the lines of the borders where the Europeans were separated by this line from the natives, from the Native Americans, where there is this influence or this connection between three elements: the European American, the colonialist, and the blacks, and also the Native Americans. We'll talk about this later. This is called living on the frontier. But to Henry David Thoreau, here you talk about people living on the margins of the society. Henry David Thoreau in Walden spent much time contemplating and writing without intermingling with society, so that he was living on the margin of the society. Even Will Durant, the writer who wrote The Story of Civilization, believes that Henry David Thoreau was whiling away his time in Walden, يلهو في Walden. He was not so happy with them. Okay? Walden inspired William Butler Yeats, a passionate Irish nationalist, to write The Lake Isle of Inns Free, while Thoreau says civil disobedience. You can learn a lot from this essay, Civil Disobedience. Henry David Thoreau was against the establishment. He didn't pay tax. He was imprisoned by the government simply because he was a transcendentalist who was not happy with what is going on of establishing systems and orders, etc., etc. Civil disobedience, with its theory of passive resistance based on the moral necessity for the just individual to disobey unjust laws. The just individual to disobey unjust laws. It was an inspiration for Mahatma Gandhi's Indian independence movement and Martin Luther King's struggle for Black American civil rights in the 20th century. We will come later to Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream We Shall Overcome. Okay? Now, after Walt Whitman, Ralph Waldo Emerson, all these concern themselves with fiction writing and theorization. But Walt Whitman was a poet. He was a carpenter by profession, but he was a poet from New York, Long Island. He was born in Long Island, New York. Walt Whitman was a part-time carpenter and man of the people, whose brilliant, innovative, creative work expressed the country's democratic spirit. Look at how they looked at democracy being the melting pot of all ideals, okay, where they had the potential to express themselves and the right to express themselves. Whitman was largely self-taught. He left school at the age of 11 and to go to work, missing the sort of traditional education that made most American authors respectful imitators of the English. He wanted to get away from the burdens of imitating English writers. Okay? But this was luckily because of his lack of education. His Leaves of Grass, 1855, were rewritten and revised throughout his life. In this book, Leaves of Grass, you can see the affinity with nature from the title, Leaves of Grass, أوراق العشب. أوراق العشب. In this book, he has this poem, Song of Myself. Song of Myself, individualist orientation is clear from the very beginning of the poem, even from the title. You are aware of individualist orientation immediately, even before the reading of the poem starts. Song of Myself is the most stunningly original poem ever written by an American. It's a very long one. A visionary book celebrating all creation. Leaves of Grass was inspired largely by Emerson's writings, especially his essay, The Poet. We've mentioned it before, which predicted a robust, strong, open-hearted, universal kind of poet, uncannily like Whitman himself. So when Whitman read Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay, The Poet, he was motivated to be that poet who was universal to everyone, the people's poet. The poem's innovative, unrhymed, free verse of form, open celebration of sexuality, vibrant democratic sensibility, and extreme romantic assertion that the poet's self was one with the poem, the universe, and the reader permanently altered the course of American poetry. This poem was a watershed in the American literary scene. Movement ripples through Song of Myself like restless music. Look at this. Look, try to reflect the picture. What can you see in the picture? Oceans, mountains, okay? He describes himself blatantly. My ties and ballasts leave me. I travel, I sail, my elbows rest in the sea gaps. I skirt the Sierras. My palms cover continents. I am afoot with my vision. My ties, he is no longer tied, okay? He is no longer burdened with anything. These shackles, these ties, these burdens, okay, are away from him. He is roaming in the skies, okay? I travel with my imagination. Remember, romantic poetry is about free imagination. I sail. I go through the seas. My elbows rest in the sea gaps. I can control nature around me. I skirt the Sierras, mountains, okay? I skirt mountains. I look at mountains from the above, okay? My palms cover continents. Imagine the globe is like the whole globe, the continents, all these elements of nature, including the continents, are covered by his palms, okay? My palms cover continents. I am afoot with my vision. His vision is so wide, okay? These lines are so important in the Song of Myself and the Leaves of Grass, written by who? By Walt Whitman. Remember these lines because you might be asked to discuss them later, okay? The poem bulges with myriad concrete sights and sounds. Whitman's birds are not the conventional winged spirits of poetry. They are even more, okay? The mother of all condemned for a witch burnt with dry wood, her children gazing on, I am the hound and slave. I wince at the bite of the dogs. I am the mashed fireman with breastbone broken. He was considered to be the people's man, okay? The man of the people. And this is manifested in these lines. The mother of all condemned for a witch burnt with dry wood, her children gazing on. I am the hound and the slave. I am the slave who is escaping and being on the run, okay? When Whitman wrote this, he daringly turned upside down the general opinion that America was too brash and new to be poetic. Brash self-confidence, but with little influence, okay? So he gave America its own image as a soil that can produce pure literature, innovative literature, okay? Whitman's main claim to immorality lies in Song of Myself. Immortality, immortality, to be mortal, to be eternal, to be remembered throughout times, okay? Lies in Songwa. Here, he places the romantic self at the center of the consciousness of the poem. I celebrate myself, the self, the importance of the self. Remember self-realization, self-reliance, what else? I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume, you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as God belongs to you. Okay, man is the center of romantic idea here. Whitman's voice electrifies even modern readers with his proclamation of the unity and vital force of all creation. For next time, I want you to sit down and follow the outline and what it says. For now, I would like to again to ask you to make use of this material and to follow me on Moodle, so that I'm going to leave questions for you. But I want also you to focus on the idea of transcendentalism and the relationship between the difference between romanticism and transcendentalism. For now, thank you very much and see you next time in the 5th class. Bye-bye.